Alrighty then, welcome everybody to this week's class of QA at the Point. I'm going to start sharing my screen here, and today we are going to be going through an assessment. Think of it as like a group mock interview. I was hoping that people would be submitting their code. We had one person submit their code, so we're going to be going over their code base as an example. But my hope for this is that you get to see a real world technical assessment for quality engineers that requires testing, that requires UI automation and API automation. We do a code review together to see what you did well, what you can improve on, and all that good stuff. So it looks like Sindhu is here. Sindhu, how are you?
Fine, sir.
Sindhu, how would you feel if we did a code review of your solution that you sent over?
Yeah, good.
Would you be okay with that? Putting you on the spot a little bit, but I hope you're okay with that. Okay, so let's go through the assessment first, and then I have a few different pieces. Like for example, Verif took down their stuff, and so there was a demo QA example that I can show, but no one sent me anything for this one, so we might just skip it. And then I have some bonus questions and exercises to kind of get you thinking about the world of quality in a more holistic way rather than just functional testing or UI testing. So first things first, this was the task. So if you took it, I'm going to move this over here because I see my face. If you took it, then there was this website. It's down now. So if you click on it, it actually goes 404. But I have this example right here because this is basically what it looked like. You had this homepage that had these. You had a field to enter your full name, a language, and you can imagine all the languages were supported. There were tons of countries, and there was like 100 of them. There's lots of countries. And then there were 4 or 5 different document types, like a passport or a social security number, and things like that. They had different document types. And then this launch via thing. And all this would do is, if you were in context and clicked launch verif, then it would open up an iframe, like a little pop-up would appear. And you would see more details for next steps and then a QR code to scan. If you did redirect and then did launch verif, it would actually redirect the URL and open up a brand new page with all the content and a QR code. So with this context, let's go through this. So Verif is an identity verification platform. That's what they do. They help, it's probably like employers make sure that their candidates are real and they're good people, but they just do this identity verification. So with that, the first thing that they wanted you to do was to create a test plan. And they said, please describe the approach you would use to test this application and write a test plan. This is the part that I think a lot of people, every person that I've seen do this challenge, did this very poorly. So, so I'm very curious to see your reaction to certain things, and when I show my test plan, what you take away from it. And as we go through this, by the way, I'm not at all saying that the way that I'm doing it is the right way. It is a solution, but there's so many different styles and approaches. So I'll just show mine so you can see an example. The next step was then automating. So create a set of automated tests for the configuration of the verification flow. So when they meant this verification flow, you would configure things here first, what language, what country, what document type, which one of these, and then click launch verif. So that's what they meant by configuration. We expect to see both UI and API tests. The scope here, so you have some idea of what you need to do. You don't need to write tests for the verification flow itself. So when they said taking pictures, videos, or selfies, the next screen asked you, please upload a picture of yourself. Please scan this QR code so then you can submit these documents. And they said, don't worry about that. Just get to the QR code page and then your test is done. So that's what they were talking about here. Please also ignore the QR code. Kind of said that already. For the UI tests, only the demo session configuration parts are in scope. So configuring language, document, country, type, all that good stuff. For API tests, 2 endpoints are in scope. One that creates a new session to do the verification with the sessions endpoint, and then the sessions endpoint that requests a session configuration. And they didn't give you any documentation. They just said, you got to figure it out. And they were nice enough to give you a hint and say you can find these endpoints by using the Chrome Dev Tools. So you have like these kind of mini challenges within this, because you have to go to the website, you have to make a test plan, but also know how to use the tools you have access to in order to find these endpoints, write tests against them, and then also write the UI code as well. The additional requirements, they said that you have to version control, meaning that you have to use something like GitHub or Bitbucket or GitLab. It has to be version controlled. Tests should produce an actionable report. They just wanted something, they wanted a report rather than just like a 3 tests failed in the command line, right? They wanted something that they could see and consume. We should be able to run tests on our machines. We have Docker if that helps. So they wanted it to be as easy as possible to run on their machine. And they're giving you a hint here, Docker. You can use any language and tools that you like to get this done. For simplicity of the task, you may consider that only Chrome is supported. So don't worry about testing IE or Firefox or anything like that. And then once you were done, you sent a link. And in this case, he sent it to me. There was one person who was very, very lost with this part. They felt like they understood everything else except for the test plan. And this has happened in a lot of, not just this interview assessment, a lot of technical assessments ask you to create a test plan or ask you to create QA artifacts, if you will. And a lot of people have a really hard time with that for some reason. And I think it's, from my experience, it's usually because they just never learned how to make one that was valuable. And so many of the test plans that I saw were telling you things like, I will test Chrome. I will make sure it works with Chrome. I will make sure it works with Chrome version 99. I will make sure, like, and it's just like all these like bulleted statements like that. And that is not a test plan. But in their mind, I'm telling you what I'm going to test. Isn't that a test plan? Yeah, it's kind of part of it. We'll show examples, so don't worry. We will see examples. Okay, so Sindhu, since you're the only one who gave me one, we're going to do a code review of your solution of what you've submitted. And then we're going to kind of discuss every piece and give you a chance to talk about your decisions, your thought process, why you did what you did, all that good stuff. And this is meant to be completely constructive and help out and give you suggestions so you can improve. So just know that as well. So Cindy, you did a great job. They sent me a repo just like they were supposed to. So version controlled in GitHub. And then they split into API tests and UI tests. So Cindy, do you want to just tell me where you would like me to start? If we were the panel, so myself, we have some other people online as well. Like Leo and Alexis, we have, I'm not going to try to say your name. Anyway, all of us are we're going to act as if we're like the panel looking at your solution, working with you. So we open this up, you're on the video call with us and we say, all right, Cindy, kind of describe your solution so we can see where you're coming from and why you did what you did. So what would you say, Cindy? Where would you like me to start?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's morning here in India.
Yeah, it's like 5:30 or 6 in the morning, right, Cindy?
Yes, yes. Yeah, I have designed both the tests, like API test and UI test. For the API test, I have used the Postman as a tool.
You want me to do this one here?
Yeah.
Okay, and then we have this link. So let me copy this and open it up in a new one. And let's see what we got. Oh, my eyes. Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
So it's locked, so I won't be able to run anything, I don't think. We'll see. I don't know if I can. Yeah, I don't know. It says read only, so I might not be able to run anything. But we see this here. I'll increase it because it's pretty small. But here we are. All right, so you have a lot of things in here. So in the assessment, we said, here's the 2 main ones, and you decide to go, let me show you what I can do. So I think that's pretty cool that you had many things you found. So walk us through this. Where would you like me to start here?
Okay. Firstly, we go to the GET request. get environment.
Okay.
After we fire the request.
So this here, you're using, like you said, you're using Postman, and then you have these in here.
Yeah.
Now we wanted these automated. So how did you go about automating this as well?
Yeah. So can you click on verif?
This one here?
No, left side, left side. Yeah, the 3 dots.
Okay.
Run collection.
It won't let me. It's read only, so it won't let me do it. But so for what you're saying is, if you run the collection, that automatically runs all of these steps.
Yes, yes, yes.
Got it. So it's automation in that I click a button and all these get executed.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. But how would I run this inside of like an automated pipeline if I wanted to run these with every change to the API?
Yeah, you can run it through a command prompt. If you install Newman.
Okay, so you use Newman to do this?
Yeah.
And I believe you showed that in one of these, right? Where did you show that?
Yeah, quality engineer test task
This one right here?
document. Yeah.
It may not let me see it. Let's see. No. All right.
Yeah, it downloaded a file.
So this thing, Finder, let me go to downloads right here. This. I don't have no idea what this is going to open. We'll see. Hey, we got there. Okay. All right.
Yeah, you can scroll down.
Am I still scrolling?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I don't know where to go exactly.
A bit back. Yeah.
Okay.
You can open the command prompt.
So this would require that I have to install this.
Yes.
On my machine first, and then with Newman, then I can do that, run the collection and everything. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So the first bit of feedback that I have is, in order for me to see this, I have to download a file. That's the first thing. So having to do that, you're adding some work for the interviewers to go through, and there's nothing in your repo telling me to do this. So I wouldn't have known to even go here. So immediately I would have been like, I don't know. I'm just looking at files and I don't know how to set this up. I don't know. You see what I mean? Like, so I have to download files. Now I have to install things on my machine in order to get this thing to work. So it's a lot of steps for the interviewer to have to do. And that wouldn't be a problem, but I can promise you that there will be people that will make it so that I don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Would putting it in a README be, I mean, it would be a better approach? Would that be a good approach though?
I would have preferred something like a README, because then I would see it without having to download anything, right? It would just
Okay.
appear. So that would make it more accessible, if you will, for anyone that goes to this repo. So that would solve that problem of having to download files. It's just scary to download a file. I don't know what this is going to do, right? So I'd rather just be able to see the repo and know I'm safe. On top of that, the README helps you with that bit, but that still leaves us with the problem of I have to install things on my machine in order for this to work.
Yeah, you need to download these files in order to generate a report.
Yeah. So that would be one thing. And in their task, they said use something like Docker, so then any one of us can install this thing, and we wouldn't have to install. We would just make an image or make a container, and we'd just be able to execute it. So this, using something like Docker would make it so then I don't have to do all of these steps, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's another bit that I would say there. But if I were to install Newman and do npm install and all that good stuff, I'm sure this would work. So looking at what you have here, it looks like you have all these bits in place. Each one of these, I believe, has tests, if I remember correctly. So let's go through one of these and kind of talk about what's inside of here. So let's do, there was one of these, let me see here, tests. I think it was this one. So let me minimize this as much as I possibly can. Click this. All right. And this one too. Yes. Fantastic. All right. So here we have get ID via session. So all of your tests use this, right? Test that the status code is 200. Check if the response is below 200 milliseconds. And the first thing I saw was that you weren't checking for under 200 milliseconds. This looks like 1,000 milliseconds, right? So if it was 300 milliseconds, the test would fail and your comments are a little misleading. So that was the first thing that stood out for me. Going from there, we call it an integration test. We're setting different variables, and this is very, very reminiscent of what you do in Postman, right? So setting the ID from the data you have, you're setting these as collection variables, so that way you can pass them around, right? Because I believe in Postman, you're required to set environment variables and things like that, right? In order to pass things to different tests. So that's what we're doing here. Then we're logging some stuff as well. We're grabbing the JSON data from it. We're grabbing this country. We're grabbing the type. We're setting those variables to be used in other places as well. And then we set the session ID right here. So now we have a session ID too. And then we have this validate schema. And this is a schema object. I don't know if anyone's familiar with doing schema validation, but this is a very, very large object, this one here. And then finally, we have the tests, right? Make sure that this is a good thing. Make sure that it follows the schema. So seeing that, I would love to hear other people's thoughts and feelings about the test that you're seeing for this API. What do you like? What questions do you have? We want to give Sindhu a chance to answer any of them.
I like that she is validating the schema, but I would validate some of the fields in that schema as well. Maybe we can get that schema, but like whether we are getting the right value or not, that's also important.
Yeah, so we're getting an object back and we're making sure that it has it's the right shape. But right now it doesn't look like, at least from what we're currently looking at, it doesn't look like we're checking any of the actual values from it. So is that kind of where you're getting at, Leo?
Yes.
So Sindhu, what do you think about that? Do you have an idea of how you would do that?
Yeah, I could validate values as well.
And this is a huge object. So if which field or fields would you be looking at?
Maybe.
There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of these things.
Yeah.
So it looks like, are you pulling some values from the JSON response and then setting those in environment variables?
Yeah, let me go to one of them here. So like this, for example, right? Like we're setting this ID so that way, and again, I believe this is how it works. So then the rest of the tests inside of here can access these, or I shouldn't say tests, the rest of these requests can access this information and use it.
Right, so it looks like on line 21 and 22, they're getting something from the actual JSON data.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be that might be a good place to start. Validate those since you're going to be using those.
It makes sense to me. Okay, so this is the kind of stuff that, you know, as you're going through this, and as the interviewing panel or the people doing the code review of this, some of the things that stand out is, and this is just mainly because of Postman, this is a very verbose thing, and it takes a lot of work for me to parse through all of this, especially when we got here. I'm like, well, holy moly, okay, that's really cool, but Okay, here's what we're doing with the test, right? And I don't know if Postman has a way of being able to move things to different places so then you can reuse them, or if this is kind of the way that they suggest doing it, is just putting it in the same file. But myself personally, I wouldn't use Postman to automate my API tests. Can anyone tell me why? Or do you have experience doing it?
So I have some things. It depends on what I'm doing. Scalability, Postman is a little rough. But if you need something quick and dirty to pass something that maybe isn't going to be reused, but you just need to validate, I think Postman can be a great tool for that.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I don't like using Postman for test automation. If I need to test an API, like Jeff said, like quick and dirty way manually, yes, but like for automation, because it requires a lot of code duplication and also like running those tests is problematic, right? From different depends on the machine that you are using or the operating system you are using.
Can I talk? Like as a beginner, my question is, how are you gonna know the test you're supposed to do should be quick and dirty or not?
Quick and dirty means you should not automate that way. Manually test quick and dirty.
Yeah, I mean, how do you know you need to test something quick and dirty? That's what my question is.
That's a good question. I have an answer, but I'd love to hear what other people have to say.
I have an answer. If you're going to be repeating it many times, then it's a good candidate for automation. If you're just probably going to run through it one time and a validation that way, that would be a quick and dirty type of
That makes sense.
reason.
Yeah. Carlos, if you would be doing this test, what would you choose? What tool would you choose to test this?
Yeah, so I mean, something like Postman I like for things like design, when you're designing APIs, or when you are exploring APIs. I like it a lot. So when I hear quick and dirty, in my mind, it's more so I'm more exploring. Like I don't really do quick and dirty testing. So I'm trying to like wrap my head around that verbiage of, let me just do some quick and dirty testing. Or in my mind, if it's quick and dirty, that means I don't know enough about it. And so I'm really just exploring it with something. So I'm trying to think of like a time when I did something just quick and dirty, like, oh, let me just test this real fast for whatever reason. And maybe it was like, oh, let me see if I can just log in real quick. But
So I can give you an example.
yeah, help me out, because I'm not.
I came into a company, I was doing some contract work, and they had Postman Collection set up, but they had zero testing. They didn't have a framework set up. They didn't have anything. And they wanted quick feedback on how's their API running. Half of the work was done through already then in Postman because they had their collection with all the API requests. Then all you would need to do is add your tests to that collection, or even duplicate that collection, add your tests, and then you can run it in kind of an integration fashion. But then you're not, I mean, it's not necessarily going to be reusable or scalable in a great way, but it is going to give you feedback and answers really quick. And it's kind of a low hanging fruit type of situation.
Okay, that doesn't sound quick and dirty to me, though. I guess for me, it's you had, you decided to use
quick
writing these tests and everything, but
yeah, quick because the collection's already built, so I'm not having to. So that part's already set. Dirty
right.
Because it's not going to be something that's easily maintained or scalable. Probably you could do it that way, but at some point you're going to want to move out of Postman into something more a better programming language with a better framework.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess at that point it's really just preference of wording. Because in my mind, it sounds like you made a trade-off. You made a decision based off of the constraints you were within. Sounded like a good decision because you needed something right then and there. So yeah, I can see where quick and dirty. Yeah, when I think of testing and quick and dirty, I'm like,
No, I get you. I'll try to use better verbiage from here.
no, you're good. You don't have to change it. I'm just like, I was having a hard time with it. I'm like, have I done that before? I think so. Yes, I have to have, right? Yes, I did. So I'm having like this internal monologue with myself. But that helps. So thank you for that context. We're not going to go through all of this because there's other bits too, but I think we got the idea. So we'll keep moving on.
I do have a quick question. On
Yes.
there, in the documentation, it said to install Newman. So when you have the ability to run it on the command line, that kind of makes it so you could somewhat put it into a pipeline, right?
100%. You actually could. And there's even like, if you're using like GitHub, for example, there's actions that you can already use to do Newman stuff.
Okay. So in essence, I mean, Postman could become, you do a manual if you want to just quickly do it, but then it also could be living in the pipeline. So I guess you could potentially have best of both worlds. I've never used it, but yeah.
Yep. So you can, yeah, you definitely can with Newman. That's how you would, execute those things automatically. I still, hold on. Someone put, not sure Postman connected DB. Well, I mean, I don't know, but that's out of the scope of what we were doing. We weren't looking to connect to any databases. Train of thought. Yeah, so if you needed to, exactly what, and I'm sorry, I can't see people's names, but the other, just barely the person who was talking, what they needed was, we need the tests that we currently have in Postman, we need to just turn them into automated things so we can put it in a pipeline. With that kind of constraint, yeah, I think Newman would be the low-hanging fruit. Just wrap Newman around it and then put that in your CI and you're good to go at that point, right? Your collection is now a collection of tests.
But as far as I know, like in order to use Newman on the pipeline, you have to have a Postman account. So you have to upload all of your tests to the Postman account. Otherwise, they cannot access. Or you need to download all of your tests in as like JSON, and you need to put that one, which is like an efficient way of doing that in the pipeline.
Yeah, so that's actually what Sindhu did. She put all of her information from like the
right,
Postman
but like
collection.
whenever you make any changes, it means like you have to update that JSON file.
Yeah, I mean, but that would be the same for kind of anything you do in version control, right? Like if I updated a test, I'd have to push that up again too.
Right. But like your pipeline needs to download it, or you need to have an access or the account on the Postman. If you cannot use like free account.
You're talking
like
automatically linking your GitHub account to Postman. Yes, you do need an account for that, but you could also do it the way Carlos is saying. You can export it and then push it up to the GitHub repo without having them linked.
So it sounds like linking would be the ideal solution because you don't have to download and push anything.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting, right? But what's nice as an interviewer, if the person that I'm interviewing is able to talk about these trade-offs, that tells me this person has experience, and okay, all these answers, I would have been happy already and moving on to the next part, because this tells me the person knows different approaches, has different ideas, different solutions, can talk about these trade-offs. And I'd be like, oh, sweet. I as the interview, I understand that this is just an example assessment, right? Like this may not reflect what you would do exactly if you had full access to, everything. But just the fact that we talk about it and you're able to talk in this way tells me everything I need to know as the interviewer. So don't feel like, in this case, even some of the things that, Sindhu did, and Sindhu's being awesome right now, letting us, go in here and hash this out. Even though we did it this way, that doesn't knock you down. And we would ask questions like, why did you do this? How would you then move this into CI? How, we'd have these questions, and that gives you a chance to then say, well, if that were the case, I would do this, this, and this, or I would have approached it this way. Or if we had an account, I would just link it like this. If we don't, then we can, download the file and upload it that way. But just being able to talk like that, I'm like, ooh, okay, this person knows what they're doing. It'd be awkward if I was like, how would you get this into CI? And you're like, then it's like, okay. Right. Then it becomes something that, yeah, it does knock you down a bit. But beautiful, beautiful. Slowly moving on. We'll go into the UI tests now. So for the UI test config notes.
Carlos, just one thing. Regarding the Postman tool selection, right? The question I had was like, the reason I mentioned DB was like, when we pick a tool for interview assignment, right? Shouldn't we be, analyzing the, all the cases, meaning even though they've not specified anything that, the data has to be validated with the database or anything, right? But the tool selection should be considered, in all the aspects, or
So you're saying from the point of view of the interviewer, or are you saying that as the interviewer, I said, do these things, but you as the person doing the assessment, you need to think of all of the scenarios? Is that what you're saying?
No, not all of the scenarios. Like, when I say, the choice of Postman, right? So the reason behind that, or as an interviewer, if I wanted to question, what was the choice of Postman? The drawbacks of Postman, when I see it has been selected, the things which comes to my mind is like, okay, these are the drawbacks of Postman. So the thought process of when I give this assignment to a person, right? And if my team member selects this tool, and later if the framework has to connect to the database, then again, if it is not compatible, again, all the work which I've done is I need to scrap it, right?
Yeah, and that I think like what I'd be careful there is, as the interviewer, I didn't say anything about databases in here. So if I then ask a question, like a follow-up question like that, hey, so what are some limitations of Postman? And am I looking for them to say something about databases, or just anything else that are pros and cons, of Postman? If I wanted someone to show me that they know DB stuff, then I would have put that in the assessment. Like, here's a DB exercise, do this thing too. So what you want to be careful with is you want to set the people up for success. Like, you don't want to, it's kind of unfair if you're like, oh, I said Docker here, but I wish that you used Podman. Like, you see what I mean? Like, it would have been like, oh, well, okay. I didn't think about that, This person is going through a very stressful exercise, and I don't like take-home assignments myself, but this person, I don't know how many hours they've spent on this. They're probably quite a few, and they're trying to think of these cases. They're trying to put their best foot forward, look the best they possibly can, and we're kind of we're kind of bashing what they're doing just so we can see what they think and how they respond. And so it's totally fine to ask a question like, so one of the limitations of Postman is that you can't connect to a DB. So what would you do in that case? That's totally a fine follow-up. Just know that they're not going to be as prepared to answer that because we didn't include that in what we were going to talk about here.
Okay.
So if they're able to answer it, and I guess this kind of goes into what you're hiring for as well. If you're looking for someone more senior, then I would imagine this person be able to answer that, relatively quickly and with no problem. If it's someone who's like entry level or mid level, that question might stump them. They may not have any experience with DBs at all yet, right? So it would also depend on their resume, what's on their resume, or their CV. If they talked about databases, then yeah, it would make sense to touch on databases. If they didn't, maybe we just probe real quick just to see if they do have experience with databases. And if not, okay, I was just curious. But yeah, it's one of those things that there's a few variables like the assessment, our job posting, their resume. Like, there's a few things that go into the questions you ask this person.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that was a very long-winded answer, but I hope.
Can I do a quick follow-up on that?
Yes,
the question? Would you consider database testing more white box versus black box?
It depends on what you're doing. So and I say that just because like we're using one of the databases we're using is called Neptune. It's an AWS database for graph database, whatnot. Anyway, so there's things in there where I don't have to know at all what I'm grabbing from the database. There's a very specific transformation that I need to have happen and a very specific graph that I need to have happen, but I don't care about the internals of it. So that's very much a behavioral test. And it would be more considered in the gray black area because I don't care about the internals. But there's also the ones where, you know, like I know exactly what the table looks like. I know exactly what the input's going to be, the output's going to be. I need to make sure that when I put this input in, this is the specific graphic it's generated. I control all of the variables in that test. And so that would, I mean, definitely be a white box test. So you can have, you know, different types and that works with any service or system.
Perfect.
Great question. Yeah. I wish I had like I could show you some code. But okay. Any other questions? Good ones, by the way. This is awesome. Very nice. All right. So into the UI stuff. Let's go here. Verif. And Cindy, I'm going to try my best to go through this. If I'm way off, let me know. I want to look at tests first. Oh man, I suck at Cucumber. Let's see here. So I'm assuming I go to features for the Gherkin-y stuff. So let's go here. Can everyone see that okay? I can make it a little bit bigger, I think. There we go. So one of the first requirements in this assessment was to create a test plan. Whenever I see these kind of feature files in my mind, this is where your test plan is if I don't see anything else. So is that kind of the idea, Cindy? Was this supposed to be like the test plan that you're working with?
Yeah.
Okay, so can you tell us how did you approach this test plan? And if there's any other files, let me know. But right now, is this the test plan that we're working with for the whole assessment?
Yeah, I'm using Selenium as a UI automation tool, and I'm using Cucumber and as a BDD framework.
Yeah. So
Here,
why did you go with Cucumber?
I could have gone with TestNG also, but I thought like Cucumber will be the best option.
Can you expand on that just a little bit? Like, why do you feel it was the best option? The best option for you, best option for the assessment? What do you think?
Yeah. The reason is that we could, run several, data. What you can say is, we can pass several input data.
With these examples here
to run. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have like a scenario.
Yeah, different sets of data.
All right. All right. So we'll stop. We'll stop here and pause a bit. So this is the test plan that we're working with. So I'll open it up again to the class. What do you like about this approach? Is there anything missing? Is there anything that you have questions on? What you got?
Is this the only one? Only test plan?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm like, I don't know. So yes, this is the test plan.
Well, for me, I like Cucumber because it makes it really easy for product or anyone else to know exactly what's being tested and what the expectations are of the tests. I tend to not like Cucumber for maintainability and scalability.
Can you go into that a little bit more for people that are not familiar with Cucumber?
When you just tend to start getting a lot of feature files, a lot of every test case, every test scenario basically has a feature file, and it gets really big. And you can do reusability with code, but it can be, to me, it feels spaghetti. It feels like spaghetti code when you start to go down those routes.
Right. Anybody else want to chime in on any of that?
I mean, definitely a good selection for, I mean, if the product is going to create test cases or user acceptance tests, right? So those kind of scenarios, Cucumber might be a best fit. But for I mean, as for a technical person to maintain it longer run, and it might create more complexities.
I also agree. I personally don't like using any other framework on top of like whatever I'm using, because it complicates the process. If another person comes and if that person is not familiar with the framework like Cucumber, and they will not understand like how things are tied to each other, how they work together, because a lot of things are done behind the scene, and the maintaining the code and reading the code might be a nightmare.
Yeah, so it's like now I'm looking for someone that knows Java and Gherkin in order to work in this project.
With all that said, based upon the requirements, I think this was a really good choice because you're getting your test cases and your tests simultaneously. So you're really saving time on this particular assignment.
There you go. Yeah, and that would be a great answer to. So why did you pick this one? Well, because what you just said. You know, it's like there's actually a great use case for this, and I'd be like, oh yeah, all right, fair enough. Cool. Okay. So I'm moving on. Always welcome to stop me, people. By the way, let's keep moving on. So the step definitions. I think this is what ties that feature file to things. And so here is, I'll get to this part, the step definitions. We have that given, when, then kind of looking syntax, right? So here's our given bit. If you know Selenium, you could probably read this. So take a few seconds, go through this, see what you're reading, and then let's give some feedback right now. What do you like? What questions do you have? Where do you feel there's places of improvement?
I like that there's comments. It makes it easier to, I mean, I can go through and read the code and pick it all out, but I can go right to the comments and know what the next 3 lines are going to do. Go to line 36 and then know what the next 3 lines after that are going to do.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, there's definitely a place for comments, right? Sometimes it's very helpful to have a comment, which is a whole other topic, by the way. That's a heated one on the Twitter, especially. Do you comment your code or not?
Right? If you have to comment your code, is your code good?
Driver is like hard coded in the E drive, so you have to, if you want to run this test on your machine, if you don't, you have to make that change. I would put that Chrome driver.exe as part of the project, so they don't have to change this path each time.
Yeah, I do like that suggestion quite a bit. Yeah, good one.
Yeah, and one thing is like, I mean, is there one test case or multiple test cases are present? So, I mean, if multiple test cases are present, again, we'll be, I mean, duplicating the same Chrome driver initiation, right? So if not, we can put it in a modular approach wherein the same code for maintainability.
So something like this, where we're doing this configuration and the driver bit, maybe put that in like a method or something that we can reuse.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
The WebDriver, if you scroll up a little bit, Carlos, that is WebDriver static. That might be problematic if you want to run your test in parallel.
Does that make sense for everybody, what Leo just said?
I get that.
And one more thing, like for exception handling, if the element is not present, and it would throw an exception, right? So that needs to be handled.
So let's say like line 37, if there's no element by name, the name of name, this would fail. And you're saying you want to handle this with like a try catch or something?
Yeah, and then I mean, output fail the test with a proper message.
Okay, what do y'all think about that?
Yeah, because it's if WB on line 37 comes back as null, and at line 38 will throw like null pointer exception, right? Because WB.get attribute will throw null pointer exception.
Yeah, and if the element's not found, we won't ever get here, by the way. Selenium will fail saying, right, like element not found exception. So the error that this raises is pretty helpful. So we can catch it and maybe make it a better error. But I mean, this would fail and Selenium would say I couldn't find the element with name on line 37. So I don't know if that helps, if that changes your mind, or if you're like, no, I would still do a try catch.
I thought like it would return null if you cannot find, but like I might be wrong.
Yeah, this raises an exception if I can't find it.
Okay.
All right. Well, so some of the things I do like, some of the feedback that I had, y'all touched on already. So talking about things like modularity, where going more in a modular functions and methods for a lot of these pieces. Right now, the entire given is a single method. And we haven't even gotten to the bottom yet, right? So the given itself is what, 97. It's a good like 70 lines of code, just the given itself. And so for the assignment, you know, it works, right? So functionally you completed the assignment, but this is something that does stand out because it's such a big method that is doing many things. So it would be nice if these was a little more modularized. We took pieces, just like you said, where you're able to grab this part, maybe make it a method that like is start driver or something like that, right? And then some of these pieces too. Because it's so long, we're running into a few things like this too, naming problems, where this element we're calling WB. If you didn't know, this is actually this full name field. But it's hard to know this based off of the line. The only thing that gives us that idea is this name here.
Another feedback I can provide is line 38, that variable name. That's not a Java convention actually. That string name, it's like mostly Ruby on Rails, string underscore name. It should be like camel case.
Mm-hmm.
And it's same way. I know these are small things, but in line 46, well, 47 actually, 47 and 49, it looks like that is C# convention, not Java. Because in Java, like the curly braces starts right after for loop or right after if.
Yeah, so interesting things, right? But this is the kind of stuff that as you're doing like a code review, like this stuff stands out, especially for people that know Java really well. This sticks out like a sore thumb, right? Because you're just so familiar to such a common convention. So when someone breaks that convention, it's like, wait a second, you know? And so it's good to, if you're going to be using something like Java, understanding Java. If you're doing something like Python, understanding, you know, how Python does things. And if someone calls you out on it, like in an interview, they're like, so this looks all C#, like what happened, right? Have an answer to that. Because you might go, oh, I actually didn't. Why don't I have a formatter that formats my file for me, right? Because then I wouldn't have to worry about that. So little pieces like that stand out just from us looking at this static file. But pretty interesting, right? Pretty interesting. So the test goes on. We're filling this out, right? So it's filling all these wonderful things out, and then we get to the bottom. We have our when. Here's our when, and then our then as well.
And another thing is like line 106 web element, the name and you mentioned that one, but like WB6, and if you scroll up, we will see like WB5, 4. Those are not actually self-explanatory. Like we don't know what they are, right? What is WB4? So we can give better naming. And another thing is like I see like a lot of sleep statements, like line 93 and 96. Why are we waiting that long? Like in line 105, like we are waiting like 10 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Do we really need to wait? Or we can handle that one a better way. Maybe from time to time, depends on the network traffic, we have to wait 10 seconds. But like maybe if the traffic is not that bad, like we can get the response in 2 seconds. Like there's a way we can handle those kind of things. Like instead of just hard coded, like waiting 10 seconds, maybe we can go and check every 500 milliseconds. We check like, hey, am I getting what I need? And then once you get what you need, you can just break, and then you can continue instead of just waiting 10 seconds each time. Because when you add up all of those slips, like I think we are waiting more than 20-25 seconds, right? Total. Like 10
or
3, and then I saw like 7 in somewhere. Yeah.
26. Yeah. So at least, oh no, that's commented out. So we're waiting about 30 seconds.
Isn't there a method called wait until so and so? Like, could we use that kind of thing?
Yes. And that's what I would use here, is wait until something expected is true, right? So wait until this thing exists, and then once it's there, let me use it.
It may be not always productive, because sometimes you want it in certain amount of seconds. Maybe you can use them then.
The wait class actually lets you specify how much time you want to wait for. So you can say, for this wait, I only want to wait up to 5 seconds. And if it still doesn't happen in 5 seconds, then fail the test. So you do have a little bit of control there with that wait class that you're talking about. So good idea. But all right, anything else, people, before we move on?
I know like this is another small thing, but we said like for try, catch, and then the if statements, like we were following the C# convention. But when I look at line 103, that's Java convention, and also like line 110, it's C# again. So we are mixing together, which is not a good idea, right? We should stick to the same convention.
Yeah.
Is that something that comes up a lot in interviews? Does that scratch against you? Because wouldn't most of that be caught by a linter?
That's if you're linting. Like a formatter would have caught a lot of this stuff, right? A formatter would have they would have moved all these braces to where they're at. But it doesn't look like there was a formatter on this, and we have tab spaces and spaces, right? So there are things that show that a formatter and a linter were not used in the project.
Right.
So that is something that we will very easily catch as interviewers.
Right, but as an interviewer, does that go against you as you're interviewing someone?
100% yes.
Okay.
For example, if you are one of the candidate, like pretty strong candidate, and if I need to make a decision between you and another person, if the other person follows those conventions, I would go with that person, right?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Leo said. I think that's the main point of this is, if it was only one person that we were interviewing, I mean, we'd probably hire the person, right? But you're interviewing tens, dozens, hundreds of people. And so you're having to compare stuff like this. And sometimes little things like syntax, like formatting, can be what gets you in the no pile. So kind of stinks, but that's just the way it is.
Oh, but I mean, that's good to know. I mean, using a formatter, like especially like VS Code, it's super easy. Just format for me.
And yeah, you have to have it set up. So you might have it like, if you're always dealing with a single language, VS Code and other, IDEs are nice because you can kind of set it and forget it. So you never really have to set it ever again. But if you're not used to doing things like that, then you may not catch this because my tests work. So who cares if it's formatted correctly? Gotcha. So things like that will happen. But yeah, if you're using an IDE that just has the formatting and linting kind of out of the box, then you may not have to worry about that. And it might be something that you don't think about. It's kind of, it just does it for me, So interesting stuff. But that's why this stands out so much, is because, it is going against Java stuff and whatnot. But okay. Let's give a virtual round of applause to Sindhu, because Sindhu is sitting here and we're going to town and she's taking it like a champion. So Sindhu, thank you so much for letting us do a code review on your solution. Everything works. So if you were to run the tests, it all works. It does exactly what the challenge asked them to do. So yes, props to you for completing it. I hope that the feedback you're receiving is helpful. I'm going to show an example that I have. It will be in Python, unfortunately, but hopefully you can see that too. And maybe everyone can get some ideas as to seeing two different solutions. And let's roast mine as well. What do you like? What don't you like? What are some places of improvement? All that good stuff the same way. So thank you again, Cindy.
Yeah, welcome.
All right, so moving on to the next piece. Let me close this. So let me go here, and this is the one that I have. This is public for everyone to see. So if you go to our knowledge base, which is just github.com/q8thepoint, you will see a list of a bunch of different repos we currently have. We're going to keep adding to them. I have this in a .NET example, and I have one in Python. I only gave myself 2 hours for each of these. So I knew Python way more because I've been coding in it day in, day out. I didn't get as far in .NET because I don't remember a lot of things. So yeah, for both of them, I did Selenium. For Python, it was Pylenium, but for C# I did Selenium because the person I was helping with this, they were doing C# and Selenium. And so I, was trying it out myself, and then, yeah, was kind of coaching them through stuff. They ended up getting rejected because I'm not going to give you the answer, right? That would be really lame. I'm not getting the assessment there. So I didn't give them any answers, but I did help them out with different questions they had around, like, so how do you do this with like WebDriver? How do you, when would you use protected? So I helped them out with things like that, but ultimately the entire assessment was up to them to do. But that's why there's one in C#. So moving into the Python one, here we go. I have a README. And I have a README because it's a very common thing to do in open source is you have a README so then everyone knows what the heck your repo is supposed to do, right? And this is more geared towards people in the community looking at this. This is why I say things like, give this a try yourself before looking at the solution. But yeah, so it wasn't geared towards like an interviewer, it's geared towards the community. So anyway, so my solution, and I say a solution, because again, there's many. To look at the solution I came up with, look for these files. My test plan is in here. My UI tests are in here. My API tests are here. And then I have my verif code abstraction, basically a class that has something for my UI and something for my API. And then I also included bugs that I found. Besides that, my solution uses Python, of course. PyTest is my test framework. Pylenium, because I built it. Requests, because that's the one I know how to use for API tests. And then I gave myself 2 hours to do this. And to be fair, transparent, it was 2 hours to solve the problem, and then I gave myself an hour to like write the documentation. So overall, it was 3 hours. For the setup, you got to use Python 3.8. Poetry is the package manager, and then if VS Code, use the Python extension for it. I do have a Docker file, so if you just did want to do Docker, you totally could. But if you wanted to clone it, here's how you would do it as well. So here's the steps for it. Do this, everything gets installed. Fantastic. Now VS Code uses it. And then here's how you run tests. If you do Poetry on PyTest, that runs all the tests. Otherwise, you can run just very specific types of tests. I only want to run the UI tests, and I want to generate an HTML report and run 3 tests at the same time, something like that, right? And then I provide an example for what the report will look like if you do this. So it'll look something like this. My eyes are burning because of the brightness, but it'll look like this. And I have one that is failing, so you can see a failure, and then 2 that are passing as well. Okay, and here's how you run the API test. Kind of the same thing. You're just saying test API instead of test UI. And then, yeah. And this part's for the community. So what questions do you have for me with the README or how I have things set up? Hit me with it before we start diving into my test plan.
It's nice that like you included all of the steps, so the interviewer doesn't have to like figure out like how to install those kind of things.
Yeah, I'm trying to make it as easy as possible for them to just get it going if they don't want to use Docker.
I also like the links that you tied to the lines.
Because otherwise I have to go through here and find everything. And there may be some files that you may not care about, right? Like the interviewer may not care about this pyproject.toml file. And so I'm kind of directing their attention to the place I want them to go instead of them kind of needlessly wandering around my repo.
How do you put those links? How do you tie those links into a line in the README file?
In Markdown, you do it like this, where you use the square brackets. This is going to be what you're going to see in the UI. And then this is the link to the location. So the user won't see this. They will see whatever's in the square brackets. Yeah, very cool. So this is a Markdown file, and this is Markdown convention. So anything with this .md. It's very cool.
Oh yeah, Carlos, so you mentioned there to use the configuration file in VS Code. I was wondering if it would be helpful to have mention what IDE to use, or that, do you think that would matter?
Yeah, I mean, it matters for you, I would say. So like, for example, in Python, the big two are VS Code or PyCharm. And I think both are totally fine. The reason why I use VS Code is because I work with many languages every single day. And so PyCharm, which is meant for Python, it can do some other things too with other languages, but it's meant for Python. If I was just doing Python, probably PyCharm, because it's great for beginners. It has a lot of things built out of the box. For example, we talked about linting and formatting. PyCharm does that for you. You don't have to configure or set up anything. VS Code, you have to do a little more configuration, but you get a lot of control because of that. So then it's a lot more lightweight. So PyCharm is a large application, and VS Code is a much smaller application. So there's a few things like that, but that's why I use VS Code. But if you use PyCharm or VS Code, I don't think that matters too much.
Right. And I like how lightweight it is. In VS Code, you can use a lot of different languages.
Yeah, I mean, right now, the place I'm working at, we got Python, TypeScript, Rust. There are obviously things like Bash and whatnot, but like it's all these just different languages. And so PyCharm wouldn't be able to help me with Go or Rust. And so that I would be limited. I'd have to open up a whole other IDE. So I'd have PyCharm on one window and I'd have like another one in another window. It's just too complicated, right? So instead just use VS Code and I can have it configured for all the languages.
Very good, thanks.
Great question. If you're wondering, by the way, if you're interested in Python and you're thinking, which one do I start with? PyCharm, I think, is a good one to start with, just because, like I said, it comes with kind of a lot of it out of the box done for you. So you don't have to worry too much about that. You can focus on the code and learning and those exercises. So yeah. All right, any other questions?
You mentioned about Docker as well, right? You have two approaches to run the test cases, right?
Yes. So I do have a Docker file. If I had more time, I would have improved it. Like, for example, I'm using this and I probably could have gotten away with a different image, but I was in a time constraint. So I'm sure there's probably an image that has a better version of me. Instead of me having to manually install Google Chrome, I'm sure there was a better one, but I was under a time crunch, so I did my very best. But yeah, so I do have a Docker file if you just want to run it, and all this gets done for you. So you just say like Docker run and then this file, and it will create the image and you can run it and all that good stuff. So you don't have to set up anything. You can just Docker run and it will automatically run these tests for you and generate an HTML report and also a JUnit report for whatever thing you're trying to get it into. For example, if you're like in Jenkins, Jenkins has built-in functionality for like JUnit XML report files, stuff like that. So I'm showing off that I can give you an HTML report and I can give you this format too.
But I mean, once the run is complete, right? So I mean, the results will be stored inside the Docker itself, right?
So you can have it by default. The way that I did it is it's going to show you inside of your terminal. So when you generate the report, it's going to appear wherever you ran the Docker image from. So if I ran it through like my home, you'll have that appear in your home directory.
Okay.
And there's also a Docker Compose version if you want to run, and I commented these out, but this isn't fancy because I straight up just got it from Selenium's repo. They have examples for different ones. So I just picked the one that works for me. And I'm like, if you want to do Docker Compose and you can run many tests at the same time, here's how you would do it. You'd say Docker compose up, just like it says here. Oh, they actually show it. You do something like this, Docker compose up, and then you would have however many Chrome, where are you, friend? Oh, right here. However many Chrome image or like Chrome services or nodes that you need, and then you just scale your tests against that. So on my local computer, I think I can probably run 4 to 8 of these nodes at the same time. So I could run 8 tests at the same time on my computer.
So the Docker has access to internet, so it should be able to, access the application under test as well, right? In this case.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, and Pylenium has a very easy way for you to connect to this, and that I can show. But yeah, so I did include Docker things for this one. But yeah, and we can go deeper into those files if you'd like it. I didn't.
I was just looking for in the README file, those instructions are mentioned there or not. I was just looking for that.
Yeah. All right. Anything else? The next thing I'm going into is my test plan. Okay, test plan it is. So I also use the feature file because for this challenge, I felt a feature file was just an easy approach for me to write my test plan. However, I didn't use a BDD framework like PyTest BDD or Cucumber or anything. I only used the feature file for my test plan, and that's it. I didn't tie it to any code. I usually get, at that point. But let me go through it, and then we can kind of see what my test plan entails. So a feature, the verif me flow. Steps in this flow. This is my understanding of it. Step 1, you select configuration and settings. So that's all this goodness. You set all this stuff up however you want to. You start the process by clicking verif me, and then verif is launched, right? So it's a pretty simple flow. I was like, okay, that's it. Oh, all right. I thought there was going to be more, but there's only these 3 steps. Cool. I had some initial questions and considerations as I was exploring the application. Immediately things started coming up, right? So the first one was UI automation may be overkill here because there's a lot of combinations. I don't know the math on this, but there's a ton. So like there's like 100 languages and like 100 countries, and this is just a sandbox. You can type in whatever you want in here. And then there was like 4 or 5 document types, and then you have in context and redirect. So many different configurations, and me testing it through the UI seemed like overkill. Like that would be really slow and cumbersome to do. There's probably better ways for me to test that if I want to test that. Instead, API and component testing is preferred for these simpler checks. If all I care about is that the configuration works, then yeah, I don't need a whole browser to tell me that. Lower level testing is better with config and setting matrices and flows since there are so many combinations. Full name is an input field. I just put infinite possibilities. You can put whatever you want in there. What are the constraints and or requirements for a valid full name? They didn't give me any of that information, and so they want me to assume, and I did assume, but I'm also asking this question explicitly. Do you, the developers, the team, do you know what the constraints are for this? What can I do? What can't I do? Because I don't want to test things that I can't do, because then I'm just, wasting that time. It might be valid tests, but I only had 2 hours. So within that constraint, well, I had to sacrifice some of my testing time, right? How do we handle invalid inputs and settings? Come to find out, they didn't. So if you left everything completely empty and clicked launch verif, it would work. There was a default config that they had. And so you couldn't make the launch verif not work. If you left anything blank, it would still work. If you tried to change it to something that was invalid, you couldn't, because it was a drop down of very specific things. And so you could like go into the HTML and force it to be something else, but it still worked, because if you put something invalid, it would say, oh, I don't know what that value is. Let me set it to United States. So it had a default value, which was really misleading because I wasn't expecting it to work when things were blank, and it did. Given our scope, I would consider accessibility testing, especially after seeing the language dropdown, is a button with a list in the wrong place. So when I talked about this, I wish I had the website so you could see it. But what I saw was when I clicked the select language, there was a dropdown that would appear with a bunch of different languages: Spanish, English, Japanese, all the different languages, right? When I inspected it inside of the DOM in the HTML, the dropdown was up here, And the list of all the languages was near the bottom past a bunch of script tags, which is a huge break in accessibility. So their website was not accessible at all. If you tried to navigate the website using a keyboard, it wouldn't work because the HTML was all over the place. And so me seeing that after exploring the application and looking, I was like, oh my gosh, holy cow, accessibility testing, this blows up, it wouldn't work. Poor people that need that, they're not going to be able to use your website. Web performance testing is out of the scope, but Pylenium would make it easy to include if we wanted as well. And I put this here because, like I said, it's out of the scope. They're not telling me to do any web performance testing, but because of the tool I'm using, I could easily add it. And literally with a line of code, I would have some performance testing. So because of my tool set and my familiarity with my tool set, I know what I can do even within the constraints that I have. And then the last bit, and then I'll open it up for questions. We can use the API to create test data and set up the app state to drive the UI and test areas more easily. So once we found the endpoints, looking at the networks tab and everything, you could actually set up the UI and just click launch verif in the configuration you wanted. So I wouldn't have to do all that drop down selecting and everything. So that was helpful too. So, okay, so there's that before we move on to the next bit. So what questions do you have? What thoughts, feelings, concerns you got for me so far?
As an interviewer, do you find it best to send an email asking some of these questions that you had questions on before the interview as you're working on it, or to do it in this format that you've done here?
Great question. I mean, obviously I'm biased because this was my solution. So I would do it this way, where I would just put it in my solution and not do the email, because then I have like I have a chance that when I'm now talking to the people about it to go over it. If they do the assessment and they don't do like any sort of feedback, like for example, right now we're doing it live so we can all ask questions and stuff. But if they give you an assignment, they look at it and then they just say, yes or no, then you probably want to email them. If you don't know what the format is, that's probably a problem that the interviews have, the interviewer has, because you should know what format you're going to be going into. But even then, I would still do it this way and make the assumptions for the sake of the challenge, but I would note down what I'm finding as I explore. So like I said, I don't know if that's the right answer. That's just how I would approach it.
No, I definitely like this approach. It shows that you thought about these things and that you would bring them up later on. I just want to kind of understand an interviewer's mindset, if they're looking for someone that's going to raise questions early on or wait, how that plays.
Yeah, so if I were giving someone this challenge, this take home assessment, and they emailed me like a list of questions, I would answer them and be like, well, assume these things, do this. If they kept asking questions, I would actually get pretty annoying pretty fast. I'd just be like, just do it, but that's why I said, like, there's a part in the interview, like the interview has a responsibility as well. So if they leave it as vague as they do, they should expect questions, especially from a tester. So I mean, I would be okay with them emailing me lists of questions. I would just answer them, be like, oh, actually, like, great call out. I really like that. Don't worry about accessibility testing, but great catch. I would say something like that. And that would only give you bonus points. Like, hey, the team, my interviewing team, this person, called out the accessibility stuff. That was a great catch, that we weren't even mentioning at all. And yet you caught that. That would just show your, testing skill. So the email, I don't think would be a problem at all. That'd be really cool if someone emailed me. I say really cool because that doesn't happen a lot.
Okay.
I would love that. If they like give me a list of questions like this, I'd be like, oh my gosh, this person is going all out,
Yeah, my thought is just because as a tester, sometimes you'll get like a JIRA ticket that has requirements, and as a tester, you're supposed to go through that list of requirements and then point out, hey, what is this? We're missing some steps here. I'm just wondering if you find that companies are looking for that, and I guess it gets addressed either way. You're doing this approach or the email approach. Yeah.
And so do whichever one you feel most comfortable with. I think the email is totally fine. And like I said, I'd be stoked if someone emailed me a list of questions about the assessment like this. not like, how much time do I have? That's a different question, right? And this is part of the reason why I don't like take-home assessments, because they'll usually say something like, don't take longer than 4 hours to do this. It's almost guaranteed you're going to take longer than 4 hours to do this because you're trying to get the job. And so I don't like that, because you spend so much of your time and you're already a busy person. I just don't like take-home assignments. But yeah, emails, doing it this way. What I want to see is that you are not just doing the requirement itself. What more are you doing as well? If all you do is what's required, you're still going to be fine, right? That's what I asked you to do as the interviewer. The problem is, if there's one other person that did this, they're going to beat you, right? So it's, if I had two people that did the exact same, like only did the requirements, then yeah, now I have to look at other variables. But if one of the candidates went way further past just the requirements and they caught bugs that we weren't even thinking about as interviewers, that leaves an impression that makes that person memorable. So I do think that you should, especially as a tester, you get a list of requirements and you go, what else is there? And as you're exploring and testing the application, you're learning a bunch about it. And that's where these questions and things appear. So they didn't say anything about accessibility testing, and yet I caught that because of my experience doing accessibility testing, because that's something that I care about quite a bit. I definitely am calling it out. I have the choice to say, it's not part of the requirements though, let me not put it there. But because I'm passionate about it, I definitely put it there and said, hey, I'm catching this. If you were to hire me, I would find things like this. I would do deeper types of testing. Here's the value that you're going to get. And this is just an example application. Imagine if I had full time, if you were hiring me 8 hours a day, imagine what I would find with that amount of time. And that just makes me look better. So somebody came off camera, so I feel like you have got something to say.
I was going to add, Carlos, this is Ed, and I'm sorry I came in late, but the idea of initiative, showing initiative is key there. As someone who does interviews, having somebody show initiative, and like you said, you're passionate about that. That's another thing that's key, is if you've got passions and it comes out in some of the things that you do in your work, sharing that is important to me as an interviewer. So.
Yeah, 100%. One of the best things you can do is be memorable. And that's why you have the requirements, but what else can you do, right? And I would hope as a tester, like when I did this and there was a default value, that was unexpected. I logged it as a bug because like I was expecting an error. I was expecting red to appear or something, right? Because that's a very normal situation to happen. So the fact that it worked anyway, sure, it works, but I didn't want it to work, right? So I'm logging that as an issue, which is, again, a different way of thinking about it. But that's what I'm looking for, especially in a tester, is to question things, challenge things, learn about things, explore these things. That's what I'm looking for. Because if it's just the requirements, I don't need a tester for that. My developers are great at doing that. My UX designers, my product people, they're great at that. So I don't have testers just to check off the requirements. Pausing, perfect. Any other questions, thoughts, feelings before I keep moving on?
Oh, yeah, real quick, Carlos. So you have a list of items that you have considerable questions you want to ask. Maybe one is about security. Is that in the scope? Security testing is very important nowadays.
100%. Yeah. So imagine if you were able to talk about that and have an example of what you would do to test that. That immediately would set you apart, right? Because I'm telling you right now from experience, not a lot of people are going to call that out, especially if I didn't put it in the assessment. It might be something you don't even consider. So the fact that you bring this up and you say, well, here's some security risks that your application has, even though it's only 2 pages, here's still things that you have a problem with security wise. I mean, oh my gosh, wow, like this person is, it sets you apart, makes you memorable. And that experience that you have is going to be such a valuable asset to my team. This person's at the top of my list now.
Oh, yeah, and then one other quick question. So yeah, we are interviewing candidates now. We've done, given take home. We also have just had the interviewee, like the Star Wars API, bring that up and have them say what they will test. And we've also had, we had existing code, have them read through the code. Do you see value in which one's better, reading through code or having them actually sit down and try to drive? write the code?
I mean, that's a great question. So the place that I will direct everyone for this is, again, our knowledge base. So if you go to base.qp.dev, I actually have an article all around what I think you should do to how to conduct high quality interviews. A whole thing on it, and it's pretty big, but like this is the table of contents, is this right here. But there's, when I talk about the technical interview, my favorite style is if the person has they have like a portfolio. I like to go through at least one of their projects with them. Oh my gosh, come on, internet, you can do this. You can do hard things. But I like doing things with the person. So I don't usually do take-home assessments, just because that usually takes a lot of their time and takes a lot of my time or my other interviewers' time.
Yeah.
So I like to just, inside the interview, let me pull up some scenarios, let me pull up some challenges, and let's do it together. And the way that I do it is I will share my screen with the challenge in front of me, and I will drive. I will do all the coding, I will do all the typing, all the searching, whatever you want me to do, I will do all of it. And I even have GitHub Copilot on, by the way. And all the candidate has to do is tell me what they would like me to do and why. Okay. So if they're like, for example, one of the challenges, and I may actually have this up right now. Let me see here. Yeah, so let me do like this one. This is an example of one. So this is the first one. This is like the icebreaker challenge. And palindrome, because hopefully everyone that's studying for programming challenges knows what a palindrome is, but you have these tests, all three of them pass, and they're all just testing this function. So this is the entire code that is this challenge, is these four things. Your job as the candidate is to identify in a fly way, identify the flaw. There's a huge problem in the code, and then prove it with a new failing test, and then fix the code so all tests pass now. That's all you have to do. And then I will type, I will drive, I'll do everything else. But I'm like, all right, where do you want to start? And that's how it goes. And then they just start talking, and we collaborate on it, and we work through it. And I'll type code, and they go, well, actually, I didn't mean that. What if we do this instead? And we try things out. And if we need to search something on Google, let's do it real quick. What are they searching for? What are they looking for? Like, all of that is this collaborative experience. And that tells me so much about the person, just like a ridiculous amount. And this is just the icebreaker challenge. The second one that I do usually is this deck of cards one, where we then build the deck of war. So it's kind of like your Star Wars one, where you have like an API. But what I do is we have this API that gives you a deck of face cards. We just want to build the game of war, which is just you shuffle a deck of cards, you draw 2 cards, highest card wins. And let's build this together. Exact same format as the previous challenge. I will do all the driving, the coding, everything. You just tell me what you want to do. And you have this blank canvas, or however you would like to approach this. And it's so interesting, the different types of ways that people go about it, how they think about it. Some people will completely freeze, and so we try to help them out. Well, let me write some code real quick. I like TDD, so let me write a TDD. Let me write some tests first. Maybe that'll give you some ideas. And I don't want them to just sit there and hate life. We want them to be successful. I want to hire this person. I don't want to say no. And so it's just very collaborative, and this gives me all the answers I need. And so far, ever since I've been doing this, and I've been doing this since I was at Workfront, every person I've hired so far has been just amazing, because I know that they're going to work well. I know that they're able to talk through things, explain things, convince me of different things, be able to talk about trade-offs when you would do stuff. Like, they're able to just go through a lot more, and it's in a high pressure situation, right? Which is totally understood as well. So I like collaboration more than here's a take-home assignment and all of my biases will be introduced when you give it to me.
What I like about the collaboration is what we've done is we have the interviewee, we say, okay, we want you to look at this code, but then also ask Phil that we are your team. So any of us, the questions, you have developer, you have another QA, you have your project manager there. We let them ask questions if they are stumped.
Yeah. I think it's so great, right? Because you get to see what questions they ask. Like, what are they even thinking about?
And you gotta get a preview of if you were to hire them, how they would work with you.
Yep. And it's nice when the person does something that tells me it's either an immediate no or an immediate yes. So if they get frustrated with like oh, what if we do it this way? And they go, I just would never do it that way. I'm like, oh, can you tell me why? I just wouldn't.
Oh.
Well, all right, that's interesting. You know, it's just immediately red flag. And I'm like, this is how you are in the interview. I can only imagine what you're like in, the actual workplace. And is that a bias? 100%, right? That's a bias coming from me, right? Because maybe it's because of the high pressure situation, but I only have 2 hours with you for that technical interview. So I got to do something, right? I got to do something to interview people.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on. I now have scenario outlines. So here we go. The first one I had was entering a valid name, because I don't know what valid or invalid means. So I'm going to write this down as documentation. So when I talk to my team about it, they can say, here's where Carlos is coming from. Is he right on the money? Is he off? What will we add? That kind of stuff, right? I don't care, by the way, because I'm not tying this to code or anything. I don't really care if this is good gherkin or not. I really don't. I'm just trying to give them an idea of what I'm looking for in this scenario. So given the full name field is an input with no visible constraints, because I have no idea, right? When I enter a valid full name, and this is my assumption of what valid means, then the verif me flow should start successfully. I'm super vague here because, again, whatever success means, we'll figure out a little bit later. So I put like my name, here's like an English full name, I put in quotes because Carlos. Anyway, I try Unicode characters. If someone had Chinese characters, what would happen? What if someone has a really short name and that is their full name? It's just Lee. How does it work there? And then what else? Because I'm sure there's other cases as well, right? So entering a valid name. Moving on. Entering an invalid name. Same concept. So full name, if I just leave it empty, just an empty string doesn't work. And it does when I wasn't expecting it to. What if I just put white space, like a tab or a space? What about numbers that are obviously incorrect? That's an incorrect name. What about SQL injection? Can I actually grab things from it? Will this give me a response or not? What else is there, right? So entering invalid full names. Checking for supported languages. This was mainly, I didn't know how I could get the list of supported languages. I didn't know where they were coming from. So I put some questions here too. Where does this come from? How can I get the text for our UI for each language? So if I change it to Japanese, the website changes to Japanese. Well, where is that text coming from? How do I know that the UI changed appropriately? Like it's not putting Chinese on there, for example, right? So those are some questions that I had there. Supported countries, same concept. Filtering countries, because you could filter them. How was the filter? How fuzzy was it? What, were there any keywords you could use or whatnot? I just did filtering by characters and that was enough. Again, I only had 2 hours. Check supported document types. I didn't know where they came from. So if we were to add one, how would I know that we added one? And then launching it in context, this does a little pop-up, right? If you select in context, then when you start it, a pop-up should appear within the iframe. If you do redirect, then when I start the verif process, I get redirected to a new web page. Then we have launch verif with valid configuration. As long as everything looks good, it should work. Again, super vague because I don't know a lot of this. And then an invalid configuration as well. I would expect to get a user-friendly error. Maybe that means that the box that's empty just highlights red. This is a required field or something like that, right? And I wasn't too specific because I didn't need to be. So there's that. There you go. So this was how I started this entire assessment, was by listing out my questions, exploring the application, learning a lot more about it, and then listing out the scenarios that I'm going to go for to complete the assessment. Very nice. All right, moving on. So the next thing was my UI tests. Yeah, let's go through the UI tests. So the UI tests, I used Pylenium. Obviously, I'm biased because I built Pylenium, but in this case, I have one fixture, and all it does is it makes me a verif UI, and I'll show you what this code looks like right now. But it's just a class that encapsulates all the actions that I would do on the website. So my test can now use this. I have some valid examples. These examples come directly from that verif.feature file, by the way. So I didn't just make these up. These were the things that I thought of as I was writing my test plan and exploring the application. I just turned these into code. But so you should see like Zang, right, for example. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, by the way. So these are my valid examples. And then here's me testing it. So test the verif valid flow. So here's my list of examples. Let me put them in verif.launch verif with all this goodness. So set the configuration this way and then launch it. And I should be able to find a QR code. It should be visible, right? And there's a QR code on the next page. So as long as the QR code was there, for them, that was enough. We didn't have to do anything else with the QR code or whatnot. So just make sure it's visible. That means it worked. For the test verif with missing values, same thing. And I put here in a comment, verif seems to work even if there are errors or missing data and defaults to English. This is a bug. What should we do? Or what should we show the user instead? So here, it shouldn't be displayed, right? So I put displayed as false. The QR code is found instead of an error. So this test fails because I wanted it to fail. So there's my UI tests. And these are 3 tests so far. Questions, thoughts, feelings, concerns?
So you had mentioned in your documentation that you could use APIs for the setup. Why would you tackle UI before API if that's the case? And you can do that first.
Yeah, so I only had 2 hours. That's going to be my answer for that. I didn't have time to do all of the setup. So the UI was easiest because Pylenium makes web automation just stupid easy. So I mean, look at the code, right? It's kind of like, there it is. It's just done. So that's why I started there. By this time, I had already seen the network tab though. Like I already knew what the APIs were. I just wanted to get this done out of the way real quick and then move on to the API side. So because of my constraint of 2 hours, I chose to not, I guess, build out a full like framework that is, data driven from the APIs and stuff. If I gave myself more time, sure. I mentioned it in my doc, so I would have done it.
Gotcha.
Any other questions, thoughts, feelings, concerns?
Where do you get the URL?
The URL comes from this. Come on, GitHub. It won't let me do it. So this right here in my fixture, this kind of starts the thing. You can think of Pylenium as like this right here. You can think of it as like the driver, like the web driver. So let me get my UI going and then visit the web page. And then that's when the test starts. I'm already on the website by the time the fixture is done.
Where do you define it? Like, how does it know like which URL it needs to use?
It's hard coded like a boss. So right here, this is the verif.py file. And so in here, let me go to the UI bits. That's this class right here. So right here, if you're familiar with Python, that should be pretty straightforward, but here's my verif UI class. It needs a driver to work. Here's my visit, and here's the URL.
Oh, okay.
I just hard coded it. Yeah, right. So if for people, you may be calling this out, like, why is this hard coded, Carlos? Again, time. If we wanted it to be more robust, we could put this somewhere else, but there was no other URL they gave me. So if we wanted to build the string, we totally could. And we want to handle that if we want to like build the URL, right? Maybe they have like staging.demo or prod.demo, right? You probably want to build the URL instead of just hard coding it.
I think hard coding is totally fine because, as you said, like there's only one URL.
Yeah, for the assessment, I think it's fine. But yeah, if they're saying like you have these 3 different environments, something like that, I would definitely spend the time to make sure I don't hard code this, and I'd probably put it somewhere else that builds it, right? But yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then here we have each one of these pieces I put into a function. So like entering the full name, they had some really buggy behavior on there, and on purpose, of course. This was on purpose, but you can't just set. So like normally in Pylenium, you would just do something like this, like the element.type and whatever you want to type into the field. But they have the elements, a few of them, they have the elements re-render. And so it actually doesn't work, and you get what's it called? The stale element reference will happen a lot. You'll set the like the name in the enter full name field, and then they'll overwrite it with something else. So they had different bad behaviors to try to trip you up to see how you would handle it. So if you're wondering why like it's so cryptic on line 52, it's because they're trying to trip you up with that. I wish you could have seen it. It's too bad they took it down. But all right, for selecting a language, and I put this comment here too, right? If you remember, the poor UI design is not successful. Bad developers. But here's our drop down. Find the language drop down. Click on it to open it. because their dropdown wasn't, it was a button. So it wasn't like a select element or anything, or even a div. It was a button you have to click on, and then the menu would appear somewhere else in the DOM. So I couldn't just do a really simple like select this and just be done with it. Nope, they made it harder on purpose, but that's how I did it. Now I'm looking at this. I could have done something better here, but I'm even code reviewing my own stuff. Let's see, line 70, selecting a country, same thing, select document type, and then launch via something, or am I going to launch via in context or redirect? And then, yep, then just launch it. So click on the thing. And then once I had all of these modularized functions defined, I can make a bigger flow function that launch verif with, be able to pass all these things in, and it would just do all of them for me in one function. And then lastly, I had my find QR code function. And after submitting it, I actually caught an issue with my own code, because if you change it to something like Chinese or Japanese, every other language like Russian, there are some other ones, like Russian was the one that I tested. They still say QR code or QR, but if there's other languages that they actually change QR to their characters. So this would actually fail on some of the languages. So after the fact, I caught that, but. Yep. All right, so there's my UI stuff. Any thoughts, feelings, questions? Okay, tells me my code is awesome. Yes, there's no problems. Fantastic. All right, for the API side of things, I just had these three. I didn't need a class, or I guess two. I didn't need a class. I just created, it was just functional. So here's creating a session. You send this payload. Then you have this, and yep, create the session. At this point, I could have gone back and then been like, oh, now that I have this, let me go into it. Let me tie the UI session to what I'm creating in with my API, and I could have tied that, but again, I for sake of time, right, I didn't. And then they had different URLs for things too. Again, trying to trip you up. So this one was demo SAS3 verif me, and this one was magic.sas. And I thought there was going to be more of them, but because I'm only doing 2 APIs, I left them hard coded, and I was okay with that. And then here's me getting a session config, passing this authorization header, hit this endpoint, and then return the response if it's okay. All right, don't say anything.
Question there, Carlos. So you said tying the API with the UI. Can you talk about that just a little bit more? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, no problem. So in here, you have this UI, right? And then when you click launch verif, it grabs all of these values, sends a payload, and then based on the response you get back, it'll either load the verification inside of an iframe or redirect you, right? And so instead of me having to type in like pi.get this, type this thing in here, pi.click this, find this select element or any of that, you could just send the payload with the full name, language, country, type, and additional data. And in your UI, you would just start with the configuration and launch from that point, instead of having to set up everything in the UI. I don't know if I explained that well. I will try again. So instead of me having to type everything in here manually and then clicking launch verif to get the verification process started, I could just send the payload, and when I open up verif.com or whatever, I would already be inside the verification flow.
And all the data then would be filled in already.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. So you do it once just to make sure that you could fill in those fields and that you tested that. But then from then on, you would use your API to fill it out because you've already tested that you can fill out those fields.
Correct. Now in this scenario, right, like, and again, I could have done that. I didn't get there, but I still think that the UI testing would have been overkill, because now I'm opening a browser just to see the QR code little view thing. So a component test, I would have done a component test, right? Or something like that. If I really care about looking at the verif code in that configuration, I don't need the whole browser. unless there's a really good reason for me that, oh, we want to have the whole browser open up for these reasons, then, then I'd be convinced. But I still think having a whole web browser open up, even shortcutting with this, is still overkill. If you're familiar with component testing, by the way, it's pretty clear why. If you're not, when I talk about component testing, it's a form of UI testing that you're able to load a component. So you can imagine, like, I could load just the full name field and test the full name field, right? So all of those tests where I was testing like different inputs, including like the SQL injection thing, you could do all those types of tests within just the component. I don't need the whole browser to be open in order for me to test the full name field. And same thing for every other component that exists on the page.
Oh yeah, Carlos, so the component testing, is it actually at the UI level or API, or? So
it's at the UI level. It renders
yeah.
the UI component, and they call it a virtual DOM, but it's as if the browser is on, and all you're loading, instead of loading a web page in the browser, you're loading a component in the browser.
Okay.
Yeah, really, really cool stuff. And if you're interested, I would say like search like component testing with React or something like that, and you'll see some really cool examples for how to do it.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Obviously, as a tester, it's good to know the limitations of these things. So going back to like that security kind of, we did a SQL injection where we tried to grab users and passwords from the users table. In a component test, you don't normally tie it to a database, right? So doing a SQL injection test inside of a component, you would only do that if you had logic to try to catch those things at the component level. Otherwise, you would probably want to have a browser spun up for that is already connected to APIs and a backend, the full stack, so then you can see how your system behaves under that. So again, knowing the limitations of different types of testing and your tools and whatnot is good to know. All right, let me show the Verif API tests. I feel like I could have done that better, but that's okay. Test API. So here we are. So here we are with valid session tests. So again, there's our names and stuff. There's this, and then I did this one as well. And there's more examples you can do. These came from my my feature file again, my test plan. And so very similar to what you saw in the UI test, just for API test this time. So let me create a session using this session and this session and this session. So this one test function is 3 test cases. Right, line 6 is a test case, line 7 is a test case, line 8 is a test case. So this one test function is 3 test cases. And then same thing for this one. This one has to create a session, so then I can get the session afterward. So you can argue, isn't this kind of testing both of these? Yes and no, because there's things that this isn't really testing, but yeah, you could. I'm sure there's an argument to be made for that as well. Okay, and then for the locale tests, right here we have, and I'm skipping it, ask team how to get dynamic ID for locales. So I didn't know how to grab these locales, and I wanted to, so then I could test all the different locales, so different combinations of country and language. So if I selected the country as like Spain, and then the language as German, what would happen, right? So it would be easy. It'd be nice if I just had like the list of locales I could do, and then I could do like use hypothesis and do like a matrix and everything, but I didn't know how to get it. So I was like, oh man, I can't show that off. And I ran out of time. This is near the end of stuff. But just make sure that I get this. It should match my expected thing, right? So if it's English, passport should look like this. If it's, I want to say Belgian, I actually don't know. It looks like this. Shows how much I suck at languages, y'all. All right, so any thoughts, questions about the API tests? Awesome. All right, so you saw this already. So the last part was my bugs. So for example, one of them was HTML does not follow accessibility. That's what that means. Accessibility best practice and guidelines. Verif me works even when no config values are set. There were other ones, right? But these are the two that I wanted to call out for sure. I put my steps. Here's like an overview of the thing. Here's the steps to reproduce it. Here's some risks. This does not affect functionality for an abled person, but this would be unusable for anyone using a screen reader or navigating with their keyboard. So some solutions. I could further test this using manual and automated tools, including Lighthouse and X. This will provide an audit and actionable report for the team to resolve. And same thing for my no error flows as well.
So that's a nice overview. I like that.
Yeah, thank you. And the last thing I did was a Docker bit, and then I submitted it. So, well, when I say submit, I pushed it to my main. I wasn't applying, but I pushed it to main and then I was done.
I have a question, Carlos.
Yes.
I think you have missed a test case wherein we get a 400 error wherein wherein the document type the document which we select from the drop down is compatible with the the document which you select is compatible with the country. If the document type is not compatible with the country, then it will throw a 400 error.
Nice. There you go. So I would definitely list that as a bug and say, here's what I caught, and then have like a failing test that shows, that you caught it, or so include that as a bug that you found. This is a step that I see a lot of people not do, where they find issues. And instead, like what I see a lot of is people will write the test to pass because they see, they want a report of all the tests I'm writing. And their thought is, well, I got to make them all pass then because I want to see a green pipeline. I want to see a green report. If you find a bug and your test caught it, like let it keep failing, right? That's a good thing. You want to show that it's failing instead of forcing the test to pass. So nice catch, and definitely add that to your bugs report.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, but that's it for that. So that was, again, a solution for how you do this. But hopefully this gives you an idea of, like when a full kind of holistic assessment where it's not just, let me write the tests and that's enough, right? The fact that, I spent time on making it look nice, to make it easy to navigate, point them to the right places, like all that is just super helpful. And as you get better with Markdown, it becomes easier and easier to do. So if this is something that you're going, holy moly, this is a whole lot, I wouldn't have expected that. I hope that you take away tidbits here of what you can do to look at your own assessment and how you did, and what changes would you make? What did you like that I did that you'd want to incorporate? What did I do that you're like, I don't know, I'd rather do this instead. Like, that's totally fine. But being able to see different solutions and kind of come up with your own philosophy, your own approach is really what I wanted you to get out of this. So I hope it was helpful. I have some other stuff if you want to stay a little after, but that was it for the main course.
May I add another thing?
Yes.
For this kind of assessments, you need to create like frequent commits, so the people can see like how you wrote it, instead of just having one big commit for everything. That's also important.
Yeah, and I didn't think about that. So there you go. I don't know what my commit history looks like. We don't know where I'm going. It's fine. But I didn't think about that. So I think it's a good idea. Yeah, I don't remember what I did here, but I would imagine that I probably just did one big commit.
You got 7.
Oh, 7 commits. Here it is. I was going to say, I'm like, I swear it was right here. 7 commits. It's super zoomed in. So things are a little different for me, but 7 commits. I mean, okay. That's not too bad. All right. I was like, I wouldn't doubt if I just did one big commit. Oh yeah, creating bugs, create the README, update test UI, and then add the Docker file. There you go. All right.
Well, some hiring managers are looking for those kind of things also. It's just a like reminder for.
Yeah, no, I really like that. So I'm glad I have 7.
Carlos, along that lines, I'm just wondering, with this, I would assume this is kind of a public repository. maybe as a hiring manager, do you worry about the fact that all the people that you're interviewing can see each other's? I mean, is there any concern there?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's one of the reasons why, like, if I were to do a take-home assignment, I don't, but if I were, that would be, they're resourceful. Well done. So let's talk about why you did what you did. And usually you find people out very quickly. And so like I've had a few people that you hear horror stories where they're interviewing and there's someone else in their ear. I've experienced this, and you can tell when someone has that person in their ear based off the questions you ask them, because you see like there's certain aspects where they do really, really well, like surprisingly, like, wow, they're awesome. And then you go into different types of questions and then they just completely get stumped and you go, huh, okay, you said you knew this from the previous part, but now that I'm talking about a scenario and an example of it, you don't know how to apply that to this. So you whiffed. So, I mean, there's ways you can go about doing that, but like with things like this assessment is down. So you can't go to the website anymore and try it out. Anytime I make something public, my interview questions will change. So I'm kind of showing people old challenges and assessments that I've done, but hopefully it's still valuable for the community. But if you were to interview at my company tomorrow, it wouldn't be that palindrome. It wouldn't be the deck of cards. It would be something else.
Thank you.
Yeah, but if they found a solution to it because I put it online, I'd be like, "Wow, good job. That's my fault."
Yeah.
Well done on your way to search. You found it.
That's the, so somebody asked me to do Fibonacci sequences. I'm like, yeah, that's a lookup problem.
Yep.
I mean, here's the answer. And by the way, I looked it up.
Yeah. And that's why I don't like that kind of stuff, like the leak code challenges and whatnot, because it's not like realistic. It's not a good example of what you're actually doing or what you're going to be doing on the job. Like, I'm not going to hire you and be like, all right, good thing we did Fibonacci, because our whole application, we're called Fibonacci AI and we're doing Fibonacci, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's not a good representation. So you're testing the person on, are you good at leak code? Instead of, can you help me solve these problems? Can you be a problem solver, design, systems thinker? Are you thinking of risks? Are you thinking about things that the rest of my team wouldn't be thinking of? Because ultimately, I'm trying to hire you to add value to what we're doing. If you're just if you do leak code challenges, I don't see how I can't envision you on my team, because we're not doing leak code challenges. So yeah. Fibonacci sequence, goodness. Yeah, that's why my icebreaker one is palindrome. I'm like, I hope you know what a palindrome is. Even then, in here, the palindrome one, I still, again, they don't have to type anything, so I'm typing everything. But I even put like examples here, right? Like, just in case you don't know what it is, but so far everyone has known what it is. But just in case you don't know, here's some examples of them. And then again, we help every step of the way. So yeah.
Oh yeah, your palindrome could also be numbers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's when you like, so one of the things I like about doing things this way is you can go as deep or as wide as you want to with these challenges. So if someone were to just be like, oh, let me just reverse the string and compare the original string to the reverse string, and that's good enough, you go, sweet. All right, how would you cut that time in half? Well, now I just went one step further, right? And I go, okay, let's write 3 more different, like, what other tests would you want to write on top of this? Can you come up with 3 more? You can take it as far as you want to. And that's the nice thing about having these kind of open challenges is, if I don't feel like I've gotten the answers I need to the questions and risks I'm trying to address from the candidate, I can go further. I can go deeper, take it, go on tangents, and that's okay. I've also interviewed TypeScript developers, and I've done this challenge with them. And at first they're terrified. Like, I don't know Python. I'm like, that's okay. I know Python. Let's go. And one of the developers I hired, they're a principal engineer. He was terrified. He even said, I don't want to do a coding challenge. And I said, well, I'm like, I admit that, like, we do have coding challenges, but I do them because it helps me see how you do things. And so you're not going to have to, I told him exactly what the format was. And they said, okay, I'll try it. So we did it. He doesn't know Python at all, but we did it. And luckily Python's pretty simple, but he was able to figure things out. We were talking through it. What does -1 mean? I don't know what that is. Oh, that gets the last thing. Oh, well, if that's the case, then we're just working through it. And at the end, he said, this is the best interview experience I've ever had. And I didn't want to do a coding challenge. And yet this is the way I would like to do them. And he got both of them done, by the way. And he was the only person so far that actually did the deck of cards in a TDD way. He actually did TDD with this, and he's the first person to ever do that. Most people go directly to this main.py and start writing the logic. But he actually did TDD and completed it. So it was pretty awesome. So I hired him, and he's awesome.
I don't like if they time you, like they give you an assignment and then on the website, and then you have only like 90 minutes. Like, well, am I supposed to start writing code directly without designing it? Like, this is the totally wrong approach, first of all. I don't know. I personally don't like it.
Yeah, and I mean, for us,
are fine. Take home is fine, but like, you need to finish this challenge in an hour or 90 minutes. I don't like those.
Yeah, I usually leave about 20 to 25 minutes for that deck of cards one. But we are very clear at the beginning, like we're not trying to get it completed. We're trying to get as far as we can the way that you think is best. And a lot of the time we don't finish. We usually get to the part where you have to start comparing cards. And that's where anyone who starts writing main.py first and just tries to write the logic first, they get stuck there every single time. Because you don't realize how everything's supposed to connect together. And because you're just writing one big main.py thing, you get stuck. It happens every single time. And so whenever someone does it more modular or in a TDD way, they get way further or usually complete it because they have these pieces. And once they run into the thing where you have to compare cards and it's not as easy as I thought it was going to be, they're able to just, here's one function, I'm going to change this. Let me add one more function that does this. Okay, that works. This works. Put them both together. We compare cards. So it's so interesting. And I let people do it however they want to. Like you saw the file. It's just import requests. That's how you start. And then the rest of it is a blank canvas and you are the artiste. So it's very interesting to see people go. But I do make sure that they know, like, we're not going to get it done probably. Let's just get as far as we can in the way that you think is best.
I'm not talking about your assessment, like, because you're together. If that person has any questions, that person can ask you. Some of them, like, they give you the link. Okay, yeah, just click on link and you start and complete it in an hour or in 90 minutes, which sometimes you cannot even use your own IDE, like whatever that browser brings you. And I don't think like you can measure that person's knowledge with those assessments.
Yeah,
I mean, like HackerRank is one of them. I'm pretty sure like you're aware of those kind of things. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the leak code or HackerRank stuff too. And I mean, the way that I do it, I'm not saying it's perfect either, right? Like I always experiment with stuff like the Copilot thing, right? With GitHub Copilot. I've tried using it and see how people do with it. I don't use it anymore because it actually trips people up. They get lost in what Copilot is creating. So you'd think it'd be like, oh, it kind of just shortcut for you and it writes the palindrome function, right? And what I wanted from it was to see they have to code review what Copilot wrote. They have to test what Copilot wrote, and I was curious, would this be a good interview experience? But my experiments so far have yielded bad results because they get tripped up by Copilot. But we do time box, right? So there's obviously problems with the way that I do it as well, because you have 20-25 minutes to try to build this game of deck of cards. And some people do really well, some people don't. Sometimes there's one question I'm trying to get them to get to, so I try to like lead them to that. Like, I still don't know if you do this. So it's so open-ended that sometimes it's hard for me to navigate them to where I would like them to go. But that doesn't happen very often, but there's definitely places that I can improve, I'm sure, in my assessments as well. So you do the very best you can in the very limited time constraint you have as an interviewer. And that's why people will do things like take home assignments, so then you don't have that 20-25 minutes. They have 4 hours, but I don't like that because it sucks for the candidate, because I just feel like they're busy. They have lives of their own. They are juggling a full-time job probably. And then me asking them, okay, after hours, only do 4 hours. I have yet to see someone only do 2 to 4 hours on a technical assessment. They usually spend days, right? They don't submit it for like a week. And I don't want that either, right? Because then I'm already forgetting of this person. And all of a sudden I receive an assessment. Oh yeah, who was this again? And by that time I've already interviewed like 20 more people. So it's, I don't know. It could just be my experience, right? My biased experience, but we're trying. So I'm always open to what other people are doing so then I can learn as well and incorporate it. But yeah, one day we'll figure this out, right? One day we'll figure out interviews. All righty then. So for the very last thing, we're already over time. So if you want to hop off, you totally can. For the last thing, I had 2 different exercises that we could have gone through. The first one was using a website like this, and then us having to say like, hey, we're hiring you as a tester. We're going to make a Japanese version of this website. When we want you to help us lead the effort of that. What would you do, right? And just seeing what you would do. It sounds interesting to ask a tester that, but it is something that like it's such a vague project with very little requirements. Japanese, that's basically the requirement. And just based off of what you're seeing in the UI, you have to come up with this plan. You have to come up with this strategy, this idea. So this is one. And then the second one was very technical of having to, you have an ELT process or an ETL process. Data is going through all these pieces. How would you make sure that the data is going through each piece the way that it needs to? So we had these 2 exercises that I was going to do as well, if we had time. But we can, or we can save it for next time. I'm open to whatever y'all want to do.
So I definitely want to do this, but I actually have to drop off. So if we save it to next time, that would be awesome for me.
All right. Not a problem.
Yeah, next
I was
time.
thinking the same. Next time would be good.
Yeah.
Okay, then we will do that. I will stop sharing my screen. There we go. Well, everybody, thank you so much for coming. Really, really appreciate it. I hope it was valuable. I hope you took something away. I'll stop the recording here soon, but thanks for joining the weekly class in Q8 The Point, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlos.